This episode is brought to you by Team Mojo, skills training and coaching for leaders who care about creating engaged and high-performing teams. We support you with communicating expectations, giving meaningful feedback, delegating, and tracking performance. In short, we facilitate team alignment that creates stronger commitment to your organization's purpose. Go to teammojo.ca for more information. Welcome to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into the areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when episodes are released. Let's get started. Today, I'm delighted to have Lindsay Recknell on the show as an expert in hope and a certified psychological health and safety advisor. Lindsay works with individuals and organizations to increase their levels of psychological health and safety in the workplace using positive psychology and the science of hope. She empowers individuals, strengthens teams, and transforms organizations through her mental health skills training certificate program, her language of mental health digital subscription, and her wellness webinars. Lindsay lives in Calgary, Canada, with her two golden retrievers, Dennis and Ramona. Lindsay, welcome to Suits and Sneakers.
Hey, thanks so much, Carrie. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you. I love that your dogs are in your bio, by the way. Definitely pets are known to help mental health, right? So
they are the reason I do what I do, for sure.
Maybe give us a little bit of background. What does a mental health skills trainer do?
It's really a made-up title. So I really feel like if you think back to sort of the leadership and management training that we've done, most of us have done over the course of our career, I feel like that's where there's been a gap. Is we've never been taught mental health skills. We've never been taught how to engage with our folks. We've never been taught, like, literally the words, the language, what to say when you notice someone isn't feeling their best, or if their performance has changed and you suspect that maybe it's because of something going on with them personally or professionally. But when we see behavior start to change, it's typically something to do with, a change in our mental health. And sometimes we just don't know what to say. Like, literally, we don't know the words to use to engage. Or we know what to say, but we don't know how to respond. Because what if someone says, Linz, I'm really not doing okay, and here's why. And sometimes we just wanted them to say fine, because we literally don't know how to respond. And so those are the kinds of skills that I've been teaching HR professionals, people leaders, is literally the scripts, the words, the questions, to have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, amazing. Because to your point, yeah, in management school or in business type environments, typically they're teaching you like tools, strategies, buzzwords and things like that are applicable to your industry, but not at all how to interact with the people who you rely on to get stuff done.
Yeah. And from a productivity perspective, obviously we all want to do our jobs, and most of us want to do our jobs really well, right? We have that desire to do good work. And when we aren't feeling awesome, it's really hard for us to do good work. And then it starts to show up in our performance. And sometimes we don't know how to address that either, right? So if we are the one not feeling well and we've recognized that our quality of work isn't where we want it to be, how do we open the door to those conversations with our leader, with our colleagues, asking for time off, for caregiving, and not just saying you have a doctor's appointment, So, like, how do we open both sides of that conversation so that it just becomes as normalized as any other conversation that we have?
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned one example, the caregiving responsibility, but what are some of the other topics that leaders struggle to talk about when it comes to mental health?
Emotional regulation. So let's say when you're in a meeting and you're receiving some feedback, and feedback being, how to grow and transform. So not negative feedback versus positive feedback, but just like feedback. Have you thought of this? Or I thought we were going to do it this way, or, anything like that. And lots of times if we aren't feeling well in our mind, it's it's hard for us to emotionally regulate in those situations. And so sometimes we respond bolder or louder or more emotional than we would if we were feeling more sort of stable with our with our mental health. And so when we find ourselves in those situations where our behavior isn't where we want it to be, that's an opportunity where we want to have different kinds of conversations. Or if we're super exhausted and feeling totally overwhelmed, or if we've tipped over into burnout, and all of a sudden, we're just going through the motions. We're not striving to be the best that we can be anymore. We're just getting it done. Or we're not pre-planning, we're not being proactive, we're just in time delivery. Again, if that's not typical for us, or if it's not how we want to be behaving, it's sort of another sign that something isn't as well as it should be or could be, or we want it to be. And then it's an opportunity for conversation in those situations as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as you're describing those scenarios, I can sort of visualize it in my brain, and like just thinking about that scenario. What can leaders do? Let's say it's them who's dysregulated. What can they do to, first of all, create a positive interaction so that maybe they're not being judged on that one moment, but understanding that it's part of a bigger landscape of how they behave?
So just to make sure I understand your question, if we're thinking of a scenario where a leader isn't feeling their best and they're not showing up in a way that they want to be showing up, how can they address that with their team?
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, just address it with their team. I really like to point to behavior, because we as humans, we are not our moments, right? We are the collective behavior and character. And so if we do something wrong or we make a wrong decision because we aren't feeling so hot, that doesn't mean that we're a bad person or that, we are malicious in our intent, right? If we just made a mistake because we weren't thinking straight, we're exhausted, we're overwhelmed, we're burnt out, it's okay to have that conversation with your team, because I'm sure as a leader, we're expecting that of our team back to us. So we don't want it to be a double standard. We want to demonstrate and sort of role model that behavior out loud for our team too. So calling out the elephant in the room to say, I made a really bad decision yesterday. I was exhausted. I was not myself. I was not thinking clearly. I apologize for that. And here's what I'm going to do to make that better. Here's the change I'm going to make. Can you help me make a different decision? Can you backstop me, team member, when I'm feeling this way? Like if I mention to you, hey, I could just use, 10-minute break. Can you fill in for me? These kinds of conversations really appealing to the team from a humanity perspective, sort of recognizing like having that shared, I don't know, awkwardness, shared embarrassment, shared experience really brings it home and grows respect on both sides, right? The vulnerability from a leader's perspective definitely goes a long way to growing respect and shared vulnerability back also, in
Mm-hmm.
my belief anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I've even had a leader who once said, I can't remember the situation, but they said, I'm really exhausted. If you notice that I'm either not getting back to you or not giving you a straight answer or just missing something, will you please just bring that to my attention? And
Yeah.
that way they enrolled us in helping to hold them accountable to what needs to get done, but at the same time gave us the backstory so that we understood and we could kind of cut them a little slack. So,
And that is the foundation of compassionate leadership. If we think about that language of compassion, it's recognizing the suffering of others and taking action to try to solve it with them. And so, I really feel like that was a demonstration of compassionate leadership, sharing what's happening, asking them to recognize when they see suffering, and then, trying to solve it together and really leaning on that team, right? The
mhm.
definition of team. Yeah. Awesome. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's flip it. How can we as leaders, you used the word recognize suffering. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can we recognize suffering in other people? Look for changes in behavior. So if you have a team member who's typically quite vocal in a meeting, if they have lots of questions, if they're really engaged and all of a sudden they're not, or if the behavior has changed and so it's a different sort of emotional display, maybe they're louder and bolder than they typically would be, or quieter and not as confident as they would typically be. Recognize changes in performance. So, if somebody's been doing a really great job and all of a sudden they're not, it's probably not because they just forget how to do their job, right? It's probably based in something. They're distracted, they're worried, they're whatever is happening for them. It's probably not just because all of a sudden they can't remember how to do that skill, or typically performance is often based in some sort of mental health struggle of some sort. And actually, as an employer, especially in Ontario, but across Canada, we actually have a duty to inquire. So if you think that there is something happening with your colleague, with your teammate, with your direct report, as a leader, we actually have a duty to ask. It's called duty to inquire. If there's a mental health concern, the employee or the team member doesn't have to tell you if there is or not. There is no duty to report. There is just a duty to inquire. So at the very least, you have to ask, and then you get to decide how to support and how to get them the resources that they need and that kind of thing. But there is a duty to ask.
What's an example? This might be a little awkward, but what's an example of a way that a leader could kind of unintentionally mess it up or not support, even if they think they want to support?
Mm-hmm. Not an awkward question at all, beyond the fact that I'm here for awkward. So ask me all the awkward questions.
Awesome.
Here's a prime example. How often does somebody tell you a story about something they're struggling with or something that they're managing through, and you go, oh, that sucks so bad. Here's a similar story of a time that this happened to me, and here I dealt with it, right? That's human nature. We want to build those connections. We want to relate. But here's the thing. You're not me. You don't know how it feels like in my body. You don't know my response to it. You don't know necessarily what I've tried and what the response has been, or what past lived experiences are coloring my perception of this experience. So often a leader will jump in and share a shared experience, feeling like, yeah, I'm making this connection, when really the impact of that on the person on the other end is unintentionally feeling minimized, feeling like they don't get it at all, or because they didn't feel it was a big deal, all of a sudden they're assuming that I shouldn't also feel like it's a big deal. But the thing is that if it matters to us, it matters, right? And so irregardless of how you would have dealt with it, leader, it doesn't really help when you say, yeah, this is how I dealt with it. It wasn't this huge deal, because that's how you dealt with it. A better response or a different response might be, that really sucks. I'm really sorry to hear that. How can I help you? What do you need from me? Do you want me to hold space? Do you want me to help you find resources? Do you want me to try to solve this for you? What would be the best way to support you in this? And then let the person dictate what would be helpful for them in this particular situation. And sometimes they won't know, right? Sometimes we're so overwhelmed, we're so emotional, we don't know, and that's okay too. Let them talk through it. Hold the space, and eventually you'll probably get there. Ask really great questions. Ask insightful questions. Try not to give advice. Try to help somebody think deeper. Come at it from a place of pure curiosity, and really try to put your own judgments away.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. And don't presume to know either, even if you think, oh yeah, I've totally been there, I totally get it. You might, but you probably don't.
Yeah, because it's a different experience for everyone, even if you've been through, like, let's say, loss of a parent, right? One person could be absolutely devastated, and I mean, it's devastating for everyone in different ways. But someone could be like, can't function, can't think, can't organize themselves to even pay their bills. And another person might be like, okay, I have to get things done. And they're very task focused, and it's almost like they have more focus, even though they're equally devastated, they just shows up in a very different way. So
Totally.
I get what you're saying. And we can't listen at the end of the day when somebody's going through something challenging, or, even if it's less than maybe a death in the family or something, but maybe it's just stress or overwhelm. Not just, sorry. Uh, even if it is something like that, at the end of the day, I think everybody wants to be listened to. And if you're talking and telling a story, you're not listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And our brains are designed to be efficient. And so if we are thinking about something else that's going on, we're present in body, but definitely not in mind and spirit.
Yeah. 100%. So I was going to ask you, like, when a leader messes up, what can they then do instead? And you went there. What else can leaders do to support someone who is not themselves at the moment?
It depends what the person is looking for as far as an outcome.
Okay.
Sometimes they just want to be heard. So let them talk it out. On the flip side of that, though, is sometimes that can get exhausting for the leader, especially if that person just wants to vent or complain or explain. As a leader, you also get to put boundaries around your time and your sort of compassionate response. So if somebody just wants to be heard, let them be heard. Maybe you want to let them be heard 2 or 3 times before you do something else with it. So, I'm here to help you. I'm here to support. Let's hear what's going on, what's on your mind. And then let's talk about what you think would be the next steps. Either we're solving this, either we're getting support you need. Can you, help me understand how I can best help you moving forward? Because as a leader, sometimes we just get into that counselor mode, or folks will come to us because we're really great listeners and they feel really heard and they feel really good and valued in that space. But it can also get super exhausting. We can get into compassion fatigue. And also, it's not our job, right? We are not professionals in this space. So there's that balance between holding space, but also getting them the help that they need. So find out what it is that would be helpful for the person, especially if it's affecting their performance and their ability to do their job, right? We're talking about workplace situations. And so if this person is, I don't know, needing more time off, let's use the example of caregiving. Maybe this person is part of the sandwich generation where they're caring for kids, they're also caring for parents, which is increasingly a position that many of us find ourselves in. And they need more time off, or they need more flexibility in their time. Okay, great. What does that look like? Who else on our team is going to be affected? Are there tasks that are time sensitive or deadline oriented that you may not be able to do? And we might need to pass those on to a different team member and give you other tasks. So asking questions around it's really accommodation. How can we accommodate this and you within the boundaries of the rest of our team as well? Also, a really great question is how much of this situation does your person want to share with their colleagues? You know, psychological safety for sure comes into play here, but if we're thinking about somebody who needs flexibility in their time off, having a conversation with the team is going to be really, really important as well. We don't want the perception to be bias or inequality, right? We want the team to know that this is accommodation because of the situation. Here's where they can help. Here's where they can contribute. Then they know that if they have a situation like this, they will also be treated in this way and have the team back them up. I think we forget that step talking about this with the team, maintaining confidentiality, but also bringing the team into the build of what this next short-term or long-term period looks like. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Absolutely. So, speaking of confidentiality, I think that's a great thing to cover because how do you draw the line or decide where it's okay to share and where it's not? And I think I have an idea for the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, I think there's definitely no black or white answer here. It absolutely needs to come from the person that is struggling, having a conversation about their levels of comfort, the psychological safety on the team. There are some situations where there's legal requirements to have conversations, or tell more of the story. So let's say that this person ends up going on short-term disability, right? But then it becomes a benefits or even a WCB kind of involvement. And so, the threshold for confidentiality would be less with those providers. But on the team's perspective, having a conversation about how much they do want to share and what that messaging can be, I think would be really, really important. It's not a decision that the leader should be making from their opinion,
Yeah.
if you ask me. I think that is
Yeah. So really
um,
getting permission, right? And
well, and a co-creation of that message, truly co-creating what and how that message should be delivered, when it should be delivered, when updates might happen, so that you are addressing that proverbial elephant in the room.
hmm So let's say you're going back to the example you gave about accommodations. Let's say urgent tasks, somebody else is taking those things on. Maybe it's like client response or
Yeah.
something like that. Um, and do you think it's okay to put deadlines on it, or is that how do you handle that?
Yeah, so let's talk about sort of this language of accommodation. So often accommodation becomes this formal plan as part of a strategy for return to work or a strategy to keep somebody in the workplace if they are being performance managed or something like that. And for sure, those exist and they are formal and they should be formal. But accommodation can also be informal in the sense of supporting somebody in the moment so that the team is also, there's no detriment to the team and the work that needs to be done. And so as far as a plan goes, I do think that intentionality around whatever time period it is. Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it, like using our example of somebody who is doing caregiving? Maybe this is a period where your parent needs some in-home care and there's 2 months of appointments and orientations and onboarding of this, home care person. So there's a 2-month time period where this is happening. And so now you're sort of putting a time frame around that. 6 weeks in, you're probably scheduling a review. How's it going? What's working? What's not? Do we need these accommodations moving forward? How do they look different moving forward? Do we need to extend it? Do you need to go on short-term disability and just, have 100% of your focus on your family? But I do feel like having we're gonna do this for the next 4 weeks, we're gonna do this for the next 8 weeks, whatever that looks like, and then have a review period built in prior to it ending so that you're now prepared for extending it, reducing it, changing it, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to clarity of expectations on both sides. Is that
Totally.
fair to say?
Yeah. And co-creation. Again, back to the leader not knowing what's best, right? It's co-creating because the leader knows what's best for the team, but probably not for that individual. And that individual probably also doesn't know what's best for the team, but they will know what's good for them. That co-creation part, I think, is so, so important. And when you co-create, you both have skin in the game. You're both like committed to actually actioning what the plan looks like as opposed to being told what to do. Anybody with teenagers probably knows what happens when you're told what to do. I think adults are no different.
Yeah. Well, and leaders, would you say it's helpful if they come in armed with maybe some options? Because I know with some people, if you say, hey, what can I do to help you? They're like, I don't know.
Oh,
They're overwhelmed, right?
totally. 100%. Yeah, definitely. But like, be creative in the options or don't come in with presumed options. It's like, I don't know, when you are telling kids that they need to go to bed, right? Their bedtime's 8 o'clock. You're going to make sure that they're in bed by 8 o'clock, but you could give them choices by saying, do you want to watch, 5 minutes of TV before bed at 8 o'clock, or do you want to read your book for 5 minutes before bedtime at 8 o'clock? They feel like they're choosing, but they still go to bed at 8 o'clock. So if you as a leader knows the things that have to be done, giving options on how those can be accomplished gives, that's where the discussion can be, as opposed to being super prescriptive about how it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely. At the beginning, we talked about hope, the science of hope. I'm really interested in this idea. Can you give a little bit of background or experience on how this plays into mental health at work?
Oh, can I? Do we get to have a whole other podcast on this? Because goodness knows I will talk about this topic forever. Um, so the science of hope is a field of study within positive psychology. Positive psychology has been around since like the late 80s. It was founded by the president of the American Psychology Association at the time, Dr. Martin Seligman. He was a psychologist. He was a scientist who studied the ways that we could reduce sadness. So traditional psychology is like going from negative to neutral. How can we decrease or increase or decrease sadness, I guess, right? Decrease sadness. At the time, he was a parent of young kids, and his daughter said to him, "Dad, you're so grouchy all the time." He's like, "Well, all right then. Possibly I'm a scientist. I could figure out why I am this way and how I can maybe be different." And so he started researching how to increase wellness. So going from neutral to positive, neutral to flourishing. And he really found that there were, I think there's 16 characteristics of flourishing. So ways that we can flourish. And within this is the science of hope. This appealed to me so much because if we think about the language of hope, we know that anticipatory, bubbly kind of feeling, right? We know what that feels like in our body. And lots of times people will say to me, like, that sounds like cosmic woo woo. This is super fluffy. I cannot get behind this at all. And I go, I get it. I'm the original skeptic. But then when I tell them that there is over 2,000 research studies to support the power of hope in our lives for like hope is responsible for success in life, at school, positive medical outcomes. There's a research study that says that somebody's hope score is more closely correlated to success in law school than somebody's who wrote the LSATs. Like there's an actual hope score you can take to see what your baseline hope level is, and
Cool.
hope can be learned. So there is tons of strategies and tactics and tools that I can teach you about how to grow your hope levels, which just increases your opportunity for cooler things in life. There's lots of definitions of what hope means. And I will tell you that the definition that I've come across or that I've developed throughout this work is that the future will be better than today when we take action over the things we can control. So future, action, and control. Because hope theory says that when we set goals, so like ideas for the future, we control for our agency, what we have control over, our sort of motivation, our why for doing things. And when we consider our pathways thinking, which is our ability to overcome the obstacles and barriers that are absolutely going to get in the way, when we can combine that, goals plus agency thinking with pathways thinking, we truly can create that future better than today.
Wow, this is fascinating stuff. I could totally dig into this too. Okay, so tell me about I have hope. Let's say it's something like a goal or a dream or something like that. And since we're talking about leadership, let's talk about a professional goal.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a project. We want to build a new product at work. And so we have ideas of how that might happen. And so obviously we have to take action. Um, you mentioned setbacks. So let's say, I don't know, somebody cuts funding for the product, or the one customer who said they would buy it, which made you think, okay, we can sell this, has said, no, we can't. And so it's a big setback. What, using that science of hope, what do you do with that?
Yeah. Excellent question. Okay. So the scenario being we have this idea, product, we're super psyched. We kind of pre-sold it to this customer, and the customer goes, sorry, not interested.
Right.
So let's leverage hope theory. So goals plus agency thinking plus pathways thinking. So the goal is, obviously, we have this product. It's cool. We like it. It'll bring us good revenue. Let's make that assumption. So we know we're quite clear on the goal. Science says that it's actually not the goal that matters. It's the progress along the path to the goal and sharing the progress along the path. So when you're planning for this project, you've likely done some work on timelines or milestones or critical path. So review that. And if you haven't done that, do that first. But let's assume you've done that work. Review that in the context now of this potential setback. Maybe you have to find a new customer, or it might look different, or you have to do more R&D or something. So look at that goal and replan it out. Also, talk to people about the goal. What kind of progress are you making? What does it look like? How does that feel? Like achievement feels good. And so if you've made a few steps of progress along the path on that goal, by talking out loud about that, you can reinvigorate yourself to that goal as well, which leads into agency thinking, which is our why, our motivation for it. You kind of tap back into why this matters. Why are you going through this effort? Truly, how does it connect to your personal values? Because when it gets tough, and we know it will because it did in our scenario, what is going to keep you getting up in the morning? Where is this connected to your why? Where is this connected to your values? Get really clear on that, because if all of a sudden it's connected to a value that doesn't matter to you, like, I don't know, somebody said if you did this product, it's a promotion opportunity, and promotion's not on your career plan, it's going to be really hard to generate the excitement and hard work and sacrifices to make this thing happen if it's not connected to your own personal value. So figure out why it is you're doing this and why it matters. That's the agency piece, because then you can lean back on that. And then the pathways thinking piece. So hopeful people have a well-developed sense of critical thinking, of this is totally possible. I'll just have to think of a better way. I like the analogy of a car coming to a dead end, and there's a left and a right. If you're driving along this road and you're at a dead end, you're not just going to get out of your car and walk away, right? You're going to go left, you're going to go right, or you're going to look up, like you're going to figure out another way. And so when we're at that proverbial end of the road in our problem, how else can we solve this? Is there another customer? Why didn't that customer want this? Is it a timing thing? Is it a minimum viable product? Are we building the wrong thing for this customer? Do they need financing? Is that what's limiting them? Can we provide financing? It's like big sky, big picture thinking on what is possible. There's something to be said for impossible versus possible. The only difference between those two words is the I am at the front. Impossible is I'm possible. And so when a hopeful person will really think of all of the reasons it can be done, as opposed to the excuses as why it can't be done.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain level of sort of tenacity, or like a will to keep going, to not give up. And I think the leader needs to help set that direction. They don't have to give all of it, but just helping to continue to move forward and help their team see the hope, or the...
Well, and connect the objective, connect the goal back to the team's why. Why do they want to do this? Why is it important for them to contribute? Not just because the leader said so or the company said so, which is all great reasons. But again, back to teenagers, tell me what to do. I'm going to do something different, right? If you want the human doing the work to stay committed to the goal, it needs to be connected back to their personal values, to their personal why, because then they're going to get up in the morning and come to work and do the job over and above what they would just do because they're getting a paycheck, right?
Yeah.
Connect it back to their personal values, which are probably things that when identified can be easily tied to the goal, right? Sometimes we haven't had a conversation with anybody, or nobody has done the work to figure out what their values are consciously, intuitively, they probably could tell you. But consciously, what are those values articulated? And then how can we tap into that to then overcome those barriers and obstacles?
Yeah, I think a lot of leaders do default to things like money and that there's goals outside of work that they're trying to pay for or accommodate or make happen, but it's sometimes it's innate things like somebody loves to learn. So they'll do
Totally.
something because they're learning in the process, and
Yeah.
so they are continue to be motivated by that.
Yeah. Or maybe they want to be a team leader and they don't like that's not officially in their title. Can you give them opportunity to lead this small piece? That can be motivating to people, right? It's those intrinsic things combined with the extrinsic. I mean, we don't work for free,
No.
but connected back to those intrinsic motivators, explicit intrinsic motivators, you can absolutely find ways to appeal to those values in pretty much every kind of work goal or initiative.
Yeah. How does all this training that you do and hearing others and supporting others in their mental health journey, how does that affect you?
Ugh, I have never felt more fulfilled in any work that I've ever done, Carrie. I have an accounting and finance background, a project
Mm.
management background, which I mean, don't get me wrong, I also love. My brain works in that way. But when I get to have conversations where people leave feeling more confident, less awkward, more aware of the words that they're using and the impact that they're having on themselves and other people, like that just feels amazing. Yeah, it is so rewarding. Um, and when I hear from leaders who, hear from their people that the conversations that they're having is just enriching their lives, let alone their careers, yeah, super hugely valuable.
Absolutely. How do you keep yourself mentally and
Yeah.
emotionally healthy?
Such a great question. I mean, I try to practice what I preach, and I am not always awesome at it. I do like to set big, hairy, audacious goals. Um, Structure is really important to me, but I would say my biggest secret sauce is leaning on habit and routine. I mentioned that our brains are designed to be efficient, and so any decision we can turn into a habit is going to free up, like literally something like 8 calories per decision or something ridiculous, but is literally going to free up energy for stuff that matters more, that is more consequential. As an example, I eat the same breakfast every day. Ridiculous, but true. It's just fuel, right? I know it's
Mhm.
well balanced. It gives me energy. I don't have to think about it. I just know. So I've now freed up that 8 calories to make a different, more important decision. I work out, I ride my bike. I like to go every day. It's the exact same route every single day. Again, I'm not thinking about it. I'm getting my fitness in. It's in a park, so it's safe. Again, a decision that I don't have to make so that I can free up my mind for more consequential decisions. If you find yourself having to make decisions all day long, every day, at the end of the day, you're probably exhausted, right? And then when you're exhausted, you're not showing up as your best self, you're not as patient as you want to be, you're probably irritated, you're not sleeping as well. That's what contributes to lower mental health. And especially in my case, if I can get into that habit and get into those routines, it is the way that I keep myself as close to baseline as possible.
Yeah. What resources or maybe there's apps, what do you recommend to people to support their mental health journey?
So I'm a huge reader. Lifelong learning is my number one value. And so I have a ton of books that I could recommend depending on where people are feeling like they're at. So, Habit and Routine, as an example, James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, game changer.
Yeah, I love that
Um,
one.
Robin Sharma's book, 5 a.m. Club, game changer.
Okay.
You do not have to be a 5 a.m.er to enjoy and get things out of this book. Um,
Okay.
you can, but you do not have to get up at 5 a.m. to really feel the benefits of this book. Love him or hate him, Sharma has, I have opinions about Robin Sharma, but this book, loved it. Absolutely loved it. Hugely beneficial. Um, I'm trained through the Canadian Mental Health Association as a psychological health and safety advisor. So if you are feeling like you want to, a leader wants to get more knowledge in this space, you could take the CMHA training as an advisor, or come and take my mental health skills certificate program. It's 21 hours, it's virtual, it's live, it happens twice a month. It is going to teach these skills. It is going to teach you how to engage, how to respond, how to take care of yourself. Also, as a leader, we also get to take care of ourselves, right? We're often so busy worrying about our people and managing up and then having to manage at home and things like that, that we forget that we also are human and we get to take care of ourselves. This certificate will teach that also.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll put the link to your website as well as to the CMHA in the show notes so that people have those resources.
Awesome.
Awesome. When you think of when you started your leadership journey, thinking back to that day, what advice would you give now to your younger self?
The shift in thinking around I have to I get to. So often we feel an obligation. I don't know, climb the corporate ladder, take the job that's going to give us financial stability, do things we don't want to do because somebody said we have to put in our time. All of those things are awesome and good, but instead of thinking about it as an obligation, I've really been thinking about things as opportunity. I get to take on this challenge and grow my skills. I get to find a routine where I get up at 5 a.m. And I am a 5 a.m.er for the record. Like I get to do these things. And that's a hopeful way to look at things. It encourages me then to take action, to take advantage of those opportunities, to really make them the thing that I want them to be. And so it's just that shift from obligation to opportunity that's been really helpful in my mind, that shift.
And it implies choice.
Totally. I'm all about the agency, 100%.
Yeah. I love that, Lindsay. Well, thank you so much for everything you shared and for giving us some additional language that we can use. I know I learned a lot today, so I can't wait for feedback from our listeners as well. So thanks again for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, clearly, I'm very passionate about these topics, so I'm happy to have this conversation with you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
We're glad you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest, look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to be notified of future episodes.